It sounds like the monarchy will be shifting in a slightly different direction.
I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
A note before we begin: the title, floated in early drafts of this story, used language like Shock's Palace and Queen's Orders ignored. That framing doesn't reflect what actually happened. And there's no evidence Queen Camilla issued any orders that were defied. What really happened is quieter, more procedural, and in some ways more interesting than a manufactured scandal. A young heir to the throne making a calculated business decision that happened to touch his own stepmother's family. This script sticks to what has actually been reported, drawing on financial disclosures, royal correspondence, and interviews given by the people involved, while being upfront about what is confirmed fact and what is informed speculation from royal watchers. Let's start with the basic facts, because they matter more than any dramatic headline could. In the summer of 2024, financial disclosures tied to the Duchy of Cornwall, the historic estate that funds the Prince of Wales, revealed something quietly significant. Annabel Elliott, the interior designer who happens to be Queen Camilla's younger sister, had been taken off the duchy's payroll. For almost 2 decades, she had been the go-to designer for royal properties across Cornwall, Wales, and the Isles of Scilly. Then, under the stewardship of the new Duke of Cornwall, Prince William, her contract simply wasn't renewed. No dramatic press conference, no statement dripping with subtext, just a line in an annual report that, once royal reporters noticed it, became one of the more talked-about family stories of the year. To understand why this small administrative decision became a headline at all, you have to understand who Annabel Elliott is and how deeply woven she has become into the fabric of the modern royal family. Annabel, born Annabel Shand, is Camilla's younger sister. The two women grew up together in the English countryside in what Annabel has described, in her own words to Vanity Fair, as an unusually close and happy childhood, one spent outdoors, surrounded by animals, without the distancing influence of nannies that shaped so many of their peers' upbringings. That closeness never faded. As adults, Camilla and Annabel remain not just siblings but genuine companions, regularly seen together at events ranging from Wimbledon to royal memorials, and by all accounts, leaning on each other through decades of very public family turbulence. When Charles, then still Prince of Wales, married Camilla in 2005, Annabel didn't just become a sister-in-law figure, she became part of the working machinery of his household. An accomplished interior designer with her own firm, Annabel Elliott Limited, based in Dorset, she was brought in to oversee interior work across a striking range of Duchy of Cornwall properties. That included holiday cottages available for public rental, duchy office spaces, and even a plant nursery. Over roughly 19 years, she quietly shaped the look and feel of properties most people will never set foot in, but that generate real income for the heir to the throne. According to duchy financial filings, her firm was paid tens of thousands of pounds across various contracts, money that, notably, the duchy has said was handled on an arm's length, normal course of business basis, meaning it wasn't simply handed to a family member without proper commercial terms. That detail matters because it's part of what makes this story more nuanced than a simple case of royal favoritism being cut off. The duchy has previously acknowledged that design contracts weren't put out to open bidding. Annabel got the work in part because of who she was connected to, but the payments themselves were structured as ordinary business transactions, not gifts or stipends. So when Prince William inherited the title of Duke of Cornwall in September 2022, following the death of Queen Elizabeth II and his father's ascension to the throne, he inherited not just a title, but a live decision to make about how and by whom over £1 billion worth of estate was going to be managed going forward. For the first year or so, not much changed on paper. Elliott's name continued to appear in duchy accounts, partly because some of the reporting periods still overlapped with the final months of Charles's tenure as Duke of Cornwall before his mother's death. But by the 2023 to 2024 financial year, the picture had shifted. The duchy's integrated annual report confirmed that Annabel Elliott's services simply weren't used during that period. Sources close to the situation, speaking to the Telegraph, put it plainly: William would no longer be employing her, And this is the part worth underlining. The decision was described as no reflection on the quality of her work. That distinction is the heart of the story. This wasn't framed, even by insiders sympathetic to Camilla's side of the family, as a firing over poor performance or personal animosity. Instead, multiple royal commentators have described it as part of a broader modernization push. Emmy Griffiths, a royal expert who discussed the move on a Right Royal podcast alongside fellow commentator Emily Nash, was careful to correct the more sensational framing that some outlets ran with. She pointed out that describing it as William firing the Queen's sister overstates what actually happened. Annabelle was never a full-time royal employee in the conventional sense. She was a contracted designer whose work, quite simply, wound down as William reassessed which roles and contracts made sense under his own leadership of the estate. That kind of clinical, almost corporate logic is very much in keeping with how William has been described by people close to the palace in recent years. He's frequently painted as a prince who came of age watching the monarchy absorb decades of criticism over nepotism, opaque finances, and perceived entitlement, and who has responded by trying to run his own affairs, and increasingly his father's institution, with a sharper eye toward public perception and financial discipline. Where his grandmother's generation might have treated a long-standing family-adjacent contractor as untouchable out of loyalty, William appears to be signaling that even close family connections won't automatically be shielded from scrutiny once he's the one holding the purse strings. That doesn't mean the decision landed without any emotional cost. According to sources cited by Now to Love, the move did cause some friction, particularly given the timing. King Charles's cancer diagnosis, disclosed in early 2024, had reportedly brought Camilla and Charles closer together than ever, with Camilla stepping into an even more central supportive role during his treatment and recovery. Removing her sister from a role she'd held for the better part of 2 decades, even for entirely defensible business reasons, landed at a moment when the Queen was already navigating enormous personal strain. One source described William's relationship with Camilla as historically cautious rather than warm, adding that the timing of this decision, whether intentional or simply a byproduct of the Duchy's reporting calendar, added a layer of difficulty to an already sensitive period for the family. It's worth being careful here. This is characterization from anonymous sources, not confirmed palace commentary, and Camilla herself has never publicly addressed the decision. What we do know is that whatever tension existed didn't translate into a public rupture. Camilla and Annabelle have continued to be seen together at high-profile events, including sitting together in the royal box at Wimbledon. In the very same summer, the payroll change became public. That single image, more than any anonymous quote, probably tells us the most about where things actually stand. 2 sisters, still close, still showing up for each other, regardless of what was happening behind the scenes with a design contract. And Annabelle Elliott's own career didn't end with the Duchy decision, far from it. She continues to run her own successful design firm, and interestingly, King Charles and Camilla reportedly turned to her directly, outside of William's Duchy structure, to oversee improvements to the restaurant and visitor center at Balmoral ahead of its public reopening. That detail is worth sitting with, because it undercuts any narrative of Annabelle being cast out of royal circles entirely. If anything, it suggests a more subtle recalibration, William drawing a firmer line around what falls under his direct financial stewardship of the Duchy, while his father and stepmother continue to engage her services in contexts that fall outside that specific structure. Sources have suggested Annabelle may continue to be called upon for appropriate opportunities involving the royal family going forward, just not as a standing line item in the Duchy of Cornwall's books. It's also worth stepping back to look at what the Duchy of Cornwall actually is, because that context explains why a decision about an interior designer's contract became national news in the first place. The Duchy isn't simply a personal allowance. It's a vast private estate, encompassing agricultural land, commercial properties, residential holdings, and coastal real estate scattered across the West Country and beyond, with an estimated value north of £1 billion. It exists specifically to fund the Duke of Cornwall, historically the heir apparent, and has done so, in various forms, Since the 14th century, every pound spent or saved within that structure is, in effect, spent or saved using income tied to a centuries-old institution that the public has grown increasingly interested in scrutinizing. That's precisely why financial disclosures that would be utterly mundane for a private business, the non-renewal of a contractor's agreement, become fodder for royal commentary shows and tabloid coverage when the contractor in question happens to share a surname connection with the Queen. William appears keenly aware of that scrutiny, and if anything, seems to be using it to his advantage. Commentators have noted that his broader approach since taking over the duchy has emphasized transparency around efficiency. He seems less interested in hiding cost-cutting moves and more interested in being seen as someone actively rooting out arrangements that could be characterized, fairly or not, as nepotistic. One royal source, describing William's mindset more broadly, suggested that he has positioned himself as considerably tougher than both his father and his late grandmother when it comes to institutional discipline, with a particular sensitivity to avoiding any hint of scandal tied to family favoritism. Whether or not that framing is entirely accurate, it fits a pattern that's been visible across several of William's public choices as Duke of Cornwall, and, more broadly, as a future monarch clearly thinking about how the institution is perceived by a public that isn't shy about criticizing royal spending. There's also a generational angle here that's easy to miss if you only focus on the Annabel Elliot detail. William was born into a royal family already reeling from decades of criticism over unaccountable wealth, and he came of age during a period when public trust in institutions, financial, political, and royal alike, was under sustained pressure. His approach to the duchy reads, at least in part, as a direct response to that environment, where earlier generations might have quietly renewed a long-standing contractor's agreement without much thought. William appears to understand that every transaction involving a family member's business will eventually surface in an annual report that journalists comb through line by line. Letting Annabel's contract lapse rather than renewing it by default may say less about any personal feeling toward her, and more about William's instinct to preemptively close off a storyline before critics could turn it into one themselves. Of course, that instinct didn't fully succeed, given that the decision became a story anyway, just one about cost discipline rather than favoritism, which is arguably the outcome William would have preferred. It's a useful case study in the strange mechanics of modern royal reporting. Even a story engineered to demonstrate fiscal responsibility can be spun, by less careful outlets, into something resembling a family feud. That's precisely how some of the more sensational headlines around this story emerged, with language suggesting William had fired or axed his stepmother's sister in a move dripping with implied hostility, when the more grounded reporting, including direct comment from insiders, consistently described it as a routine, non-personal business decision. So what does this actually tell us about the relationships at play? A few things seem reasonably well supported by the reporting. First, Camilla and Annabel's bond as sisters appears genuinely unaffected by the professional change. Their continued public appearances together speak louder than any anonymous source. Second, William's relationship with Camilla, while described by some as historically more reserved than warm, doesn't appear to have been fundamentally damaged by this decision. Either there's no indication of any lasting rift, formal or informal, between the Prince of Wales and his stepmother. Third, and perhaps most tellingly, King Charles and Camilla's willingness to continue engaging Annabel's design services outside the duchy structure at Balmoral, for instance, suggests the family found a workable way to honor her contributions and their personal closeness to her, even as William drew a clearer line around what falls under his own institutional stewardship. If there's a broader lesson in this story, it's about the increasingly public nature of royal finances and the pressure that creates on the next generation of royals to manage even small personal feeling decisions with an eye toward optics. Annabel Elliot's nearly two-decade run designing duchy properties wasn't ended by scandal, betrayal, or a dramatic falling out. It ended because a young, image-conscious heir decided that a role once justified by family connection and continuity no longer fit the leaner, more scrutiny-resistant version of the duchy he wants to run. It's a small story in the grand scheme of royal history, but it's a genuinely revealing one, offering a glimpse of how William intends to lead not through dramatic gestures or public confrontations, but through quiet, deliberate decisions that reshape the institution one line item at a time. None of this is to say the family dynamics involved are without any tension at all. Losing a role you've held for nearly 2 decades, even amicably,